Hello class, I'm working out of your geometry book 3.4. We'll be going over midpoint formula and parallel and perpendicular slope examples. To get started, if you're given the midpoint at -1, 1/2, that's the answer to the midpoint after calculating in the formula, but you are only given a point A to get there, and you are to find point B. We can use the midpoint formula to solve for that point B from what we know. Let's think all of that through before we begin. So the midpoint is the answer when we use the formula x1 plus x2 all over 2 and y1 plus y2 all over 2. We have some of this information. We have the answer, we have the midpoint across the equal sign, and we have x1, y1. What we don't have is x2, y2. So when we're thinking about that, we have two of the three pieces of information in the formula that we need to substitute in. We're going to substitute first what we have. We have -3 for x subscript 1. So those will go together. We have 4 for y subscript 1. Those will go together. We have for the x value in the midpoint, -1 is the answer for this part of the formula. And for the y value in the midpoint, the answer for the y midpoint formula. So thinking all of that through, let's start some substitution. On the next slide, I am going to put -3 in for the midpoint formula for the x1 value. I'm going to put -1 in across the equal sign for the answer to the midpoint formula. And from all of that, we should be able to find the x2 for the b value. So we will have -3 plus x2 all over 2 equals -1. To solve, we need to get rid of the 2 in our denominator. It's divided, we'll multiply by 2 on both sides. 2 goes away, and we're left with -3 plus x subscript 2 equals -2. Alright, we're going to add 3 to both sides, and now we've solved for x subscript 2, and that's going to equal 1. So our x subscript 2 is renamed as 1. Okay. Now we're going to consider our y midpoint values. We have y subscript 1 to substitute in at 4, and the answer to the y value for midpoint is 1/2. So we're going to have 4 plus y subscript 2 all over 2 equal to 1/2. So I substituted in what we know, multiply by 2 on both sides to get rid of the denominator here, and it works out that it will make 2 over 2 on the other side as well, would be 1. And now we will have 4 plus y subscript 2 equals 1. going to subtract 4 from both sides. And now y subscript 2 equals a negative 3. So now we've solved for the B point from being given the midpoint answer and a point A. We substituted until we found both the x subscript 2 and the y subscript 2. Okay, we're going to be asked about parallel slopes and perpendicular slopes. You took some notes on what a parallel slope and a perpendicular slope is. To review that, parallel slopes are equal. Think about that. If you see parallel lines, for instance, in this example, those two parallel lines, they are both going to have an equal negative slope because they are a negative type slope. And they are running parallel to each other, so their slope will be the same forever and ever and ever. That makes the parallel line, which means the slope has to be equal for the lines to be parallel. Okay, perpendicular slopes. Think about them. It's going to be like this. It's not the same as a parallel slope. There's an intersection happening. And if you think about it, the slopes have to be a negative reciprocal. And when the two slopes of the two lines, this one and this one, are multiplied together, and we have the product of their slopes, it's going to equal a negative 1. So where the parallel slopes are equal, the perpendicular slope is starkly different. It's a different kind of representation visually. It's almost like the opposite. And so that makes sense that when you multiply the slopes together of the two lines in a perpendicular line situation, you're going to have a negative 1 as the product. So let's explore this negative reciprocal a little bit more. For instance, if you had the number 5, what is the negative of 5? Well, it's negative 5, so we address the negative part. But what's the reciprocal? Flip it over. So the negative reciprocal goes to negative 1/5. And then, if you multiply 5 times negative 1/5, it's the product of that. Negative 1. So the negative reciprocal, or if you find the two slopes of a perpendicular line and multiply those slopes together, the product will be negative 1. Think that through, it makes sense. That's just how we get there numerically. Okay, we're given points such as A is negative 3, 4. You can see that. B is 3, 2. C is 1, negative 4. D is negative 2, negative 3. and E is 0, 3. And we are asked to decide if the slopes of your given points from this list are parallel or perpendicular. We can do that. So let's try the first example. For instance, line AB compared to line CD. We're deciding if these two lines comparatively are parallel or perpendicular. How do we start? We find the slope, and we need the slope formula. So our slope formula, just for reference over here, M is y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Okay, notice that when we do midpoint, it's a capital M. When we do slope, it is a lowercase m. Just a math rule. Try to remember that detail. So we have our slope formula to work with. Let's check it out. So we're going to work with A and B. Okay, so we need y2 minus y1. Here's y2 minus y1, 2 minus 4. Now we need x2 minus x1, 3 minus a negative 3. Put that negative 3 in parentheses to differentiate it from the step formula, or we subtract anyway in the middle. My stylus is getting away from me, excuse me. Negative 3. Okay, hopefully we can see that. Okay, 2 minus 4 is a negative 2 on top. 3 minus a negative 3 is like 3 plus 3, and that is a 6 on the bottom. That equals negative 1/3. That's just AB. Now we have to test CD. All right. Now look at C and D. We need the slope formula, y2 minus y1. We have negative 3 y2 minus a negative 4 all over a negative 2 minus a negative 1. This becomes plus. Negative 3 plus 4 is 1. And then negative 2 plus a negative 1 is a negative 3. So negative 1/3, negative 1/3. These slopes are the same. So they are parallel. So you just have to do some work and test for this slope formula between the two lines you're given. Let's look at more examples. We'll keep referring back to our slope formula and our points as needed, A, B, C, D, and E. We're asked to find if the line AE is parallel or perpendicular to the line BC. Then we start by finding our slopes with the slope formula. Okay, so we have AE to start with. We're going to work with A and E over here. We need y2 minus y1. That would be 3 minus 4. Then we need x2 minus x1. That is 0 minus negative 3. Three minus 4 is a negative 1. 0 minus a negative 3 minus a minus becomes plus. We talked about y in class. It's multiplied by negative 1 when we go through it. We include some invisible math in that, and 0 plus 3 is 3. Alright, so that's our first slope. We're going to compare it to slope BC. Look back, we need slope B and C. We need negative 4 minus 2 on top. And then we need 1 minus 3 on bottom. Negative 4 plus a negative 2 is a negative 6. Then 1 minus 3 is a negative 2 on the bottom. That equals 3. We have a negative 1/3 compared to a 3. First of all, is 3 the reciprocal of 1/3? Yes. Is 3 the negative reciprocal of 1/3? Yes. If we multiply these together and we say negative 1/3 times 3, the 3's cancel and we have negative 1. The product of the two slopes is negative 1. They are negative reciprocals of each other. We talked about that here. And we talked about multiplying the negative reciprocals, and the product would be negative 1. So these points are perpendicular. Because we tested their numerical slope values. I hope this helps, and I'll see you soon.